Good afternoon, everybody. It's good to see so many of you still here after a long day. I'd like to thank Jean-Michel for inviting me to chair the last session, and indeed the European University Institute for putting on this event in such magnificent surroundings. What we're going to do now is the various members of the panel will have a short introductory remarks to make, and then we'll hopefully have a debate about what we've been talking about on this panel and indeed throughout the whole day, and afterwards we'll be throwing it open to the floor for a Q&A session. But without further ado, let's hear from first Fernand Felzinger.
Yes, thank you. First, I would like to thank the Florence School of Regulators for inviting the consumers to express themselves here. I think sometimes it would be good if we would be heard a little bit more. As president of IFIAC Europe with the Association of Energy-Intensive Industry, you will not be surprised that our main pillar for us, the most important one, is global competitiveness. Can global competitiveness be reduced to the realization of the internal market? Unfortunately not. The internal market is, however, an absolute necessity. It's not enough, but it's a necessity. And we fully support the 2014 target, and we thank DG Energy and Acer for their very strong involvement to reach this target. But the problem is, in addition to an efficient internal market, we need a competitive energy mix. If you do not have competitive production, you cannot have competitive prices. And here, are we going in the right direction? Well, if you look at what's happening now, the only investments which are being made in Europe are in renewables. And you have huge amount of money flowing into this technology, knowing that this is today already extremely expensive when you look at the feed-in tariffs, at the level of the feed-in tariffs, knowing that you do not take into account the backup investments, be it maybe gas-fired power plants or maybe, as Mr. Großmann will say, even coal-fired power plants could respond to intermittent production, I don't know. But what is sure is that intermittent renewables need backup investments. They need huge grid investments. And all this is not taken into account in the assessment of the cost of renewables. But since the profitability is guaranteed, and for 20 years, all the financing capabilities are driven into this segment. So there is no room to do anything else. So, what's happening then? So we have too many renewables, we have very expensive renewables, so your electric says, well, we need a capacity market. I mean, not all of them say that, but let's say producers say, well, we need something to invest. Are we going to have 27 capacity markets in addition to 27 different support schemes for renewables? Because this is already happening. I mean, one of the problems of renewables is that we have not only expensive support schemes, but they are totally diversified between the various countries. Is this compatible with an integrated market? Actually, the thing is, what we need when we talk about renewables is what I would call a holistic vision. I mean, when you buy a cell phone, you are not buying a cell phone which will work only 25% of the time, and by the way, it's a cell phone which will decide whether it works or not. What we need is an energy production tool which delivers energy when the demand signal is there, which means we need to look at the intermittent renewables in association with the necessary backup tools to have a real energy production tool. Of course, this will demonstrate that the true cost of renewables is significantly higher than what it appears. But this is a fact. So, my point is, first, we do not want capacity markets just to compensate for the intermittence of renewable energy. What is needed is that the necessary investment be included in the support schemes and that the right decisions are taken. Is an artificial price increase of CO2 another solution? It's true that as a direct consequence will be a higher electricity price and apparently lower subsidies. But this will not change the reality that prices of renewables are far too high. So, in addition, if you artificially increase the CO2 price, you in a way contribute to kill the idea that the ETS system must be deployed outside of Europe to be really the tool to address global warming. It will also lead to carbon leakage unless, in addition to free allocations for the energy-intensive industry, we get the full, but really the full compensation of indirect EU ETS costs. But, so actually, just to make it clear, Gunnar Lundberg this morning said renewables are perturbating the ETS. I agree. But this does not mean that it is ETS that needs to be fixed. What needs to be tackled is the root cause, and the root cause is the support schemes of renewables. Actually, it is as if to develop electrical cars, we would say, well, we need to increase the price of gasoline by 3 or by 4. Is this a realistic option? No, actually the problem with the development of renewables is that scaling up immature and non-competitive technologies never brings a good result. What's happening is, like for instance in Spain, after a while, member states realize that the money which is devoted to these non-competitive assets increases, creates a debt for 20 years, and after a while, well, people say, well, no, we can't afford this, so we stop. Is this really helping the renewables industry? I think not. We don't want to eliminate the renewables industry. What we need is that the deployment of renewable industry be done with the sense of cost efficiency and to develop it at a rhythm which is affordable for Europe. Does this mean that we should do nothing? Not at all. Where is the solution? Actually, the solution is in the 2050 roadmap, which I think was an excellent exercise. What do we see there? We see that, yes, there are non-regret options like renewables and energy efficiency. And if you look at the cost between energy efficiency and investments and renewables investment between 2010 and 2050, roughly it's about the same numbers. But these two levers work very differently. Energy efficiency investments always have a lower profitability over time. We first capture the low-hanging fruits, and after that it becomes more and more expensive. The renewable, a new generation technology, on the contrary, benefits from the experience curve and makes progress over time. So actually what we should do is not look at the 2050 picture as a roadmap, as a picture, but we should look at it in a dynamic way and use the levers in the most efficient way. What we really need is a cost and climate efficient policy. At the CR conference in January, the Austrian regulator mentioned energy efficiency investments which would cost between 6 and 8 euro per ton of CO2 saved. By the way, this is compatible with the present CO2 price. On the contrary, if you look at the cost of wind farms in deep sea offshore, you will have 350 euro per ton of CO2 saved. So what we need is actually a clear assessment of the cost of the various options and that you have somebody driving these levers, paying attention to which one is the most efficient at the time it is evaluated. So what we need is really a dynamic policy. And so to say that I think we can indeed work with the three pillars together, but we need to be fact-based and to really reassess the speed at which we want to develop renewables. In our vision as consumers, if we would reduce the amount of subsidies to renewables just by 50%, I'm mainly focusing on the non-competitive intermittent renewables, and dedicate this amount to really develop competitive technologies, for instance, to develop clean technologies to extract shale gas, to develop storage technologies, things which actually really contribute to prepare an European-based industry for renewables sustainable for the future. This is the solution. And actually, to finish my speech, I'm sorry I was a little bit long, but I would like to finish with quoting President Barroso yesterday, and being French, quoting a Portuguese, using a sentence from a German writer here in Florence in front of an international audience, I think is a good picture of what Europe is today. And so I would summarize my position on renewables by let's try to limit the level of the error. Thank you.
Next, we're going to hear from Ferdinando Beccalli-Falco.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Ferdinando Beccalli-Falco, and I am the President and CEO of GE in Europe. And I'm looking at this one from the point of view of a business person. You know, it is very difficult to come at this point with this kind of panel and with all the panels that you've been followed and saying something new, something exciting, something meaningful, because we end up repeating ourselves. But what I would like to do, I'd like to take the approach of the business person and define the approach of the business person as we have to take complex problems and try to simplify them as much as possible to try to find the optimum solution at the minimum cost. So we all know that Europe is dependent, energy dependent from imports. I'm sure that in these 2 days you heard lots of numbers. I don't know, I wasn't here before, but I'm sure that there are lots of numbers telling you how much we bring from oil from outside the European Union, how much gas we import and all this kind of stuff. Just consider one thing, all these imports are costing us about €500 billion that we pay for buying energy sources. So the dependence on energy is becoming a very important economic factor, which is what a business person should be addressing, leaving aside the fact that it gives us a certain amount, a considerable amount of vulnerability because we are depending from other countries and from the will of other politicians. Our friend Ignacio has said that we have an energy policy. I don't mean to challenge what you said, but I think that we really have three energy policies. There is an energy policy on sustainability, and in my mind, in our mind, it is very narrow focused on the CO2 abatement and is not going to look at a broader spectrum. There is a security of supply policy, which is really looking only at the politics of supply rather than at the quality and quantity of supply. And there is a concept of competitiveness, which is the single market and the liberalization of the market. Now, this is all very good, is all very needed. Don't misunderstand me. We need to control CO2. We need to make sure that the political interface with other countries is perfect. We need to make sure that there is a big single market. But I think that at this point, we also need to make sure that we are connecting the dots of all these elements of technology. And we have to look at a system which is an end-to-end efficiency. And to do so, let's look at the path of energy. There are the raw materials. We need to be able to differentiate our raw materials. We talk about renewables as a form of differentiation, It is true, renewables are more expensive, but what is the main driver to reduce, or the two main drivers to reduce the cost of anything? It is the development of technology on one side and the economy of scale. We do not have economy of scale on some of these renewables, and we still need to develop a considerable amount of technology. So keep in mind, technology is important. The big question mark around nuclear. To talk about nuclear in this moment is almost like a mortal sin, and I will not do it. But I'm confident that in a certain period of time, and this period of time might be a very long period of time, but technology will be able to come up with answers that today we don't have to some of the more urgent problems of nuclear facilities. Generation. Today, in generating energy, we have a lot of waste. No matter what you're talking about. You can talk about renewable, you can talk about traditional thermal energy, but the efficiency of the equipment that is existing today, and oh, by the way, General Electric and some of the competitors are working very actively on improving this kind of efficiency, but we are still at levels that are talking about 60% of efficiency. So we are still very far from a very good and complete utilization of the energy. What do we need here? We need technology. We need investment in technology to make sure that we are discovering the new pieces that can help us in improving the losses. When we talk about transmission, losses in transmission of energy are very big. What we need to do, we need to continue this development of distributed power, distributed energy, which means, and Mr. Großmann, sorry about that one, but it means to have a considerable amount of smaller unit closer to the utilization. It means to favor the creation of energy parks close to industrial parks. And this will help in reducing the losses that we see during the transmission. Utilization. Utilization is another part where there is a considerable loss. What do we have today? We have houses that have very low level of efficiency, the level of insulation is modest, and this is just one simple example. We still use refrigerators that are consuming too much. What do we need? We need technology. We need to develop those intelligent platforms that are necessary to reduce the wastage and consumption. So I think that you know where I'm leading because I said it several different times. We need an organic European policy that is helping and favors the development of technology. We need to make sure that when our European politicians are sitting down to define the budget for the next 7 years, are not going to invest the amount of money that Europe is going to invest for instance, agricultural policy, which represents only 3% of the total economy of Europe, but that are going to invest in helping developing universities, companies, private companies, and public companies to develop the technology. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nanni. Next, we're going to hear from Umberto Vergine.
Director, thank you for inviting me to this session. I think that is a session that is focusing on a very interesting and timely issues. The background is that over the recent years, European policymakers have taken the center stage in the energy field, and the 3 main goals have been shaping the EU decision. Ambitious targets have been set on each of these 3 fields with the objective to complete the internal market by 2014. There has been an ongoing debate if each of these 3 European energy pillars and their related targets are appropriate. Indeed, as this session suggests, we need to focus also on the consistency among the energy pillars and on the several trade-offs that should be dealt with to really improve the effectiveness of an European energy policy. I will give you some example of what for a European gas player perspective are of primary importance. And to be clear on the type of European gas player I do represent, and to help also in understanding my subsequent comments, I would like to specify that Eni Gas and Power has contracted long-term the gas supply to Europe of 87 billion cubic meters per year, and overall, including all our participated companies, we sell 95 billion of cubic meters per year, of which 82 in the EU 27 countries. It seems to me that in designing the new set of rules that are required to achieve a competitive and integrated gas market by 2014, the regulators, most of you, are also focusing mainly on the goal of achieving a perfect functioning internal gas market. Indeed, while on one hand, the regulators explicitly recognize that long-term contracts are still important to guarantee stability and security of supply and are essential to promote investments in new gas production development and in new transportation infrastructures, on the other hand, they are setting rules aimed at fostering the development of a short-term gas market without the necessary precaution to avoid the undermining of the long-term contract market structure. This is particularly true since the end of 2008, also because unexpected market conditions have been speeding up this process of change, immediately reducing the competitiveness of the long-term take-or-pay contracts. This has been a very explosive discontinuity. Due to the combination effect of regulation measures and of the new market condition, today, a greater balance between the internal market and the stability and security of supply objective is, in my opinion, certainly needed. The trade-off between these two goals is emerging very clearly and needs to be addressed. On gas industry and on gas market, Europe is not the US, at least not yet. Neither is it comparable with the UK market of a few years ago. Therefore, a European gas market exclusively based on short-term trade would carry at least three significant risks that are worth considering. First, if shippers are not willing to book capacity for long-term, this will certainly limit the development of new gas infrastructure. Second, if midstreamers are not willing to commit themselves to long-term supply contracts, this will reduce the attractiveness of the European gas market to producers. Producers that, due to the nature of their business, all of them, are willing to invest huge money only when they can contract gas for the long term. And this is particularly true since the producers will find buyers that are still willing to commit to long terms in other parts of the global gas market, like the emerging gas market and countries that count on the guarantee given by these long-term contracts to secure energy, not only energy, a clean energy, to satisfy their social and economical growth plans. Certainly, also high hub price would attract gas supplies, but Europe would find itself in an uncomfortable position of being at the bottom of the merit order of the physical gas delivery. Producers would first honor their long-term supply commitments, and only afterwards, or opportunistically, they will deliver gas to the European hub. Finally, but in my mind this is very important, given the oligopolistic nature of the European gas supplies, there would also be a serious risk of Europe having a perfectly functioning internal market where prices are not necessarily always market-driven. Someone may say that this is an extremely picture. However, many recognize that this could easily happen. But even if you believe that these are not only potential risks, please accept that this is enough to require an in-depth analysis about how stability and security of supply will be redefined if short-term trade only prevails. Indeed, the European midstreamer business model, which until today has offered a well-tested and balanced form of interface between the internal market and its external supplier, would be totally jeopardized. We should look at the implementation of the 3 European energy pillars in a more coordinated and comprehensive way, examining all the positive and the negative implications they carry. Thank you.
Thank you, Umberto. And now we will hear from Jean-François Cirelli.
Buongiorno. Thank you for the invitation. Maybe at this juncture, 6 brief remarks. First, regarding the 3 pillars, I believe that everybody agrees that these are the right ones, but maybe the question is really to guarantees that these 3 pillars are taken in the right equal footing, and that we are not favoring one on the versus the others. And maybe the question is not maybe the 3 pillars, but better the question, do we have a European energy policy? And for me, the question is really no. No, we don't have it, and I see even more diverging views among member states about the future of energy policy in Europe. So it's not going in the right direction. Second remark, we are far away from a satisfactory situation today in Europe if we want to really tackle the challenges ahead of us. And also there, I see that over years, the situation has worsened and that has not improved. Third remark, everybody is saying that Europe needs a lot of investment to replace old plants, to build new infrastructures, to make progress towards a CO2-free world. Ignazio reminded us the figures. But what are we witnessing today? The investment climate in Europe has never been so uncertain. Uncertainties about future demand, energy demand, uncertainties due to political interventionism, and these has increased over the last 3 years. Regulatory uncertainties everywhere are making investors think twice before taking any important investment decision. And today, really, I do believe that we should really ask the question whether Europe has really the ability to provide to its industry sufficient confidence today to finance the large investments which are required in the coming decades. The fourth remarks, everybody wants an energy mix with less CO2 content. And basically, we have an instrument in the EU. It's the ETS, the European Trading Scheme, but with a CO2 price of 6 to 8 euros, clearly it's not reaching the target. So again, here we need clearly to revitalize this market, to provide visibility and confidence. And we don't have this confidence today, so there is really an urgent need to try to fix this market. We cannot ask for CO2 reduction if CO2 emissions are not properly priced. And in passing, I do agree that we better not to be alone in the world to pursue that kind of policies. Fifth remark, there is, in my view, an urgent need to reconcile political objectives with the reality. And 2 examples. First, policies pushes for high penetration of renewables, and the industry has responded to these policies. But these renewable schemes are still based mainly on subsidies, and today in European context, with the economic crisis, with the debt burden, with the tax increases, it is really legitimate that we in the utilities companies were asking ourselves to which extent these subsidy schemes are sustainable. And as in my view, renewables will continue to rely on subsidies for a long time. Clearly, the question again is a question of confidence in the future. And this is clearly a real issue. The second example is competitiveness of Europe, which is clearly becoming more and more important, a more important issue for the future of Europe. So to which extent we, as stakeholders, everybody can afford a rise in the energy prices for the future. And this is a question for policymakers to decide, but we clearly need more progress everywhere to better understand the real cost of different energy solutions and their translation to consumer bills. in a nutshell, we do not want to be the scapegoat. If we want a policy which is more expensive, we have to do and to say that it will be more expensive. And the sixth and last comment and remark is certainly there should be a brilliant future for gas in Europe, which allows to fulfill our objectives and what the objective that the EU is pursuing. But again, there is too much uncertainties about the future of gas today in Europe. Umberto has mentioned some of them. Will we do the other way that the US is to take in today, i.e. there is a dash for gas in the US, and clearly today there is a dash for coal in Europe in a sense, and coal is coming back. And this is it really what we want? That's the question. To sum up, first, I think we really need to assess the cost of energy solutions and the consequences of the prices for our consumers, because I think public opinion this is a real issue for them. Second, we need really to reduce uncertainties for the sector, otherwise we will not invest anymore in Europe. And third, we should take again the role of gas in the future and adopt more favorable policies for gas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jean-François. And now I'd like to call on Christian von Hirschhausen.
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. I was thinking about what are the three pillars that brings us together here. Is it the European University Institute, the Florence School of Regulation, and the think tank? Probably. Is it the industry, the policy community, and the academics? Probably. I think what brings us together, and I want to pick up the proverb of Ronnie Bellman's this morning, is the party. I'm here to party for 3 days, 2.5 days. That's what I've come here. Thanks a lot, Jean-Michel, for inviting me. And the party we're partying is the Energy Roadmap 2050, I guess. That's agreed by all member states. It's under discussion. So let's think, what do we need for this party, except for the grids that I'll talk about. We need 3 times 3 pillars. And we agreed in the pre-discussion to be a little controversial, otherwise everybody's going to fall asleep. So let me say what I always say, but some people consider it controversial. The invitation to the party includes generation, it includes networks, and it includes the demand side, right? So what does it say in the Energy Roadmap 2050? There are 3 types of generation. If I come to this pillar, renewables, nuclear, and CCS. Renewables is clear. It's going to give us 0 marginal cost. At some point in time, it's going to bring down the cost of electricity, but it has fixed costs, of course, that need to be borne, which are much lower than the 2 other technologies. It's very easy. Nuclear is extremely expensive, both in fixed costs and in variable costs. Nuclear, we have, as our consumer protector just said, nuclear is what you should have mentioned, because that's where most of the public money has gone into over the last 40 years. Let me come to my favorite. CCTS is not only extremely expensive, it does not even exist. You can't have a party without participants. We don't have a CCTS chain, which includes, as was mentioned, transportation. It does not exist nowhere in the world. And judging from the last 15 years, it won't. That's why I think we should not spoil the party with the data. And with all due respect to Panellists, the respected colleague, in the roadmap, because it's 3,481 for the year 2010. I don't know where this figure comes from, because CCTS did not exist in 2010, it does not exist today, and it may not exist tomorrow. We could have put in 6,000, or we could have put in 25. It's absolutely out of the blue. That's why I think we should not spoil the party by the 6.7 gigawatt of CCTS in the roadmap for 2020, because they don't exist. They are put into the roadmap because in the EPR there was potential support for 6 projects. None of them have worked so far. The 5th of December, Vattenfall has abandoned its project. Longanet was abandoned. Porto Tolla was abandoned. The Spanish project is having difficulties. The only region that still relies on the sea is the Netherlands and the UK and Norway. But there's no transportation and there's no storage because it's meant for enhanced oil and gas recovery. Still, we need to continue with this party. The second pillar is electricity grids. And here I think the debate is a little bit one-sided. We always talk about the European superhighways, and we're going to work on this in the e-highways project. But I think everything that relates to this is the optimal grid is mistaken because it may take the wrong objective function of welfare optimization. I wonder who in this room would support the objective of European-wide welfare optimization if the Florentines in the medieval times would have wanted to optimize welfare. They wouldn't have created the Arti, who were hardcore oligopolists. What else do we have? And I don't mean to say I love electricity lines. The more, the better, and do even 2 or 3 times as much if you can. But we need to think about regional cooperation. It was very impressive that Werner Bolz showed the cooperation potential in the gas sector this afternoon, and it was purely related to Southeast Europe. It was Hungary, Bulgaria, Romania, going up to Austria, okay? And also we should not forget something that we tend to forget is the decentral grids. Take southern Spain with a little bit of wind, a little bit of solar. Take the batteries that are left over from not being used in electric mobility, and you have 20 kilowatt hours, 30 kilowatt hours, you have electricity to be stored overnight for 6 to 7 cents. And that is there's a second component of the grid party. Now, if you do a party, you need to invite your neighbors. These neighbors have become more difficult to access, be it North Africa or the MENA regions in the Middle East, North Africa, be it Ukraine, which some people would not invite them to the party today. Ronnie would invite the Russian nuclear industry to the party. There are other people in this room who would not. But I would also insist on the fact that we need to invite 2 more in-house inhabitants that are not part of the union, but that are extremely important for successing this party. One is Norway and one is Switzerland. Norway is often treated as the blue battery, and knowing many Norwegians, I know that they might not agree to this party. And then I come to the last point, which is the smallest country in the region, but probably the most important for succeeding the 2050 roadmap is Switzerland. It's not part of the Union, which is in trouble or in diversity with other countries for other issues, which has substantial infrastructure, railroad, airway problems with its neighbors, and which has the most important transfer station in Laufenburg, where 12 380 kV lines come together, and if we don't get the Swiss into this party, we're in trouble. Thank you very much, and I'll continue to enjoy this party here in Florence.
Thank you very much, Christian. And lastly, Jürgen Großmann.
Well, thank you. So I'm the guy that's keeping you away from the party tonight to follow up on Christian von Hirschhausen's statement. But let me first state I'm neither a lawyer nor a politician, so expect some not politically correct statements from me. My views may be simplistic, but you know, I'm, as a CEO, responsible for the bottom line of what the company does. And therefore, I'm kind of skeptical when I hear these 40 years projections, because 40 years ago, in the early 70s, there were lots of politicians that telling us that by the year 2012, we would have 100% nuclear power generation in Europe. Seriously. Had we believed it in that time, had we all invested in this, we would have gone belly up. So no politician will tell us later, yeah, I gave you that idea, you know, that long-term target, and when he abandons the target, we are the ones that spent the money. So we should ask ourselves that, are those things that we today believe that are the cornerstones of our policy, will they really hold? During this conference, we learned that the 450 ppm may be unattainable. Therefore, the 2-degree target, will it stay? You know, what is if the world's going to 650 ppm? And there is lots of consequences from that. There is the question, you know, does the world turn away from coal? The second thing, and that is, I believe in markets. And when I look at the EU energy policy, it is helping national governments to reduce the influence of the market. And do we really believe that any bureaucratic system will bring us the competitiveness? And Jean-François, I'm 100% I'm in agreement. You know, our belief is that markets and competition will drive prices down and not bureaucracy. In that respect, I mean, talking about capacity markets, that's you know, quite a contradiction in itself. I've looked it up. In the U.S., in the northeastern U.S., there is 3,000 pages of regulation to describe the capacity market. Is that a market? So then, of course, you ask yourself, does it all add up? And I agree, we don't have a European energy policy. If you look at the German system, we believe that between 2030 and 2050, we can count on 30% electricity imports. Now, last Sunday, François Hollande was elected in France. He's bringing about a turnaround in the French energy policy. Now, if France also decides to import 30% of its electricity, and Poland, because, you know, they're still coal-based, when they decide to import 30%, well, who's going to supply it? So let's be very, very skeptical, and let's not forget that Europe needs to stay competitive. And all our, you know, we have certain myths in the European policies. One is, of course, renewables create jobs. That's the new green revolution, and the world will buy European renewable technologies. Is that really true? Are we subsidizing something that is creating jobs and is helping our survival in the future? And I'm not so sure. So 3 pillars sound wonderful, you know. A 3-legged stool stands relatively stable. Well, 3 pillars only if they're lined correctly. If they're in one line, look at cricket, you know, it's kind of fragile thing, it can tilt over. And if the center of gravity in a 3-legged stool is outside of the triangle, see the simple engineer, it's not so stable. So we got to see that those pillars have an equal length. And I also believe that, you know, this equal length is a little bit about regulated and non-regulated market parts. When I look just at Germany, you know, in 2010, 65% of electricity generation was competitive, 35% was regulated, renewable energies and combined heat and power. In just the next 20 years, you know, we will have only 20% in competition. All the rest will be regulated, it's renewables and so on. Do you think a market can exist? I really don't think so. And you know, sometimes I get the idea that politicians like to set 40 years targets because none of us will be around to see whether we achieve them. And that is kind of easy. So I'm here as a simple CEO, and I have to make decisions that are sometimes contradictory. See, if I invest in renewables, they're taking away the intraday peak and make my CCGTs less profitable. You know, RWE in my tenure built about 6.5 gigawatts of the most modern CCGTs. We didn't use GE turbines. You were too expensive, Danny. We used Alstom and we regretted it, but okay, well, okay, yeah, you did. Yeah, you like him, I know, yeah. I like him too, but not for other reasons. So at the moment, you know, in the first quarter of 2012, I know I have to come to a, you don't want to be entertained, so I come to the end soon. So in a place that gave you the divine comedy like Florence, we have to take it a little or lighter. So the CCGTs that we built had operating hours like 200 in 3 months. You think you can make money with that? So also, you know, everybody demands investments in pump storage. Well, pump storage is only feasible when you have an intraday peak. And when that's taken away by the renewables, it just won't work. So let me conclude. I think we first have to set our priorities. And if we had, and that came out from many contributions here, and I really appreciate them. Ignacio and Fernand said this. If the ETS is the guiding system, then we don't need overriding other systems. I ask myself, now that, you know, we lost a lot of money by the premature closure of our nuclear fleet, can we continue operating our lignite fleet? Will the CO2 price be the only determining factor, or will there be other regulation that will prevent us from using coal? And I think that would be detrimental to the competitiveness of Europe. So my simple reminder is, don't act national, act European. Let ETS be the only domineering system for combat climate change, and let an external energy market also introduce the renewables into some kind of a competitiveness and a market system. Because what we're creating is a bureaucratic and subsidized monster that in the end can kill Europe's position in the world. So that's the view from the poor CEO that has to defend the bottom line. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jürgen. We come to near the end of the session on EU energy policy to discover that the EU doesn't have an energy policy, or not one that Jürgen would appreciate. But I mean, perhaps we could start with you. How should the EU shape energy policy, if at all? Is it through market-based systems?
Well, first, I think we should perhaps abolish national statistics. You know, when one country says, oh, we're so much better than our neighboring country, that's bad. Also, you know, we learned in this February that only by a European exchange could we keep our grids in operation. And I think that this is essential, that we do not see this as a national competition, but as one Europe. And also, you know, if we do not align the subsidy schemes for renewables, we create a lot of misinvestment. We calculated that Europe could save 150 billion euros a year by creating the photovoltaic where there is, let's say, more than 3,000 hours of sunshine. Or, you know, by creating the right capacity market, you know, if you do not exclude, for example, existing capacity. See, capacity markets, who is advocating capacity markets? Those guys like Dani Beccalli that want to sell us new CCGTs, even if they only run a couple of hours a year. Well then, just for Germany, a capacity market would cost us something like 5 billion a year. If you would include existing capacity and also load reduction, the same effect could probably cost us like 40 to 50 million a year. Somebody's got to pay for it all, these grace policies. And I fear that, you know, then carbon leakage happens for all other reasons. And that's what I would like to remind you. Europe needs to stay competitive.
Simon, if I may.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I mean, thank you, Jürgen, for bringing me into the picture. CCGT is a great solution that we have. It's not the only solution that we offer, and you know very well that we are working on selling technologies without going into the renewables that are smaller technologies, much more flexible technologies that can help any kind of producer, being the big four in Germany or being the Stadtwerke in Germany or small producers that can help in giving a much more flexible kind of production. So yes, if you want to buy a couple of CCGT, I love it, but I also got few other solutions to offer to you. A little marketing, it doesn't do any bad.
Could I add to this? Could I add to two points in this discussion very briefly? First of all, I think this discussion on capacity markets is very interesting and enlightening, but we need to take care that it not become too academic. It doesn't make sense to devise a European capacity instrument. Take the example of Germany. We know, thanks to the engineers, which are very good planners and which traditionally don't believe in the market on purpose, we know we need probably 2 or 3 CCGTs in southeast Germany. We have converted Biblis, the nuclear power station, into a phase shifter, which keeps the stability in southwest Germany, so we need 2 or 3 CCGTs, probably. We can't achieve this with the European capacity schemes, but we need something that Werner Bolz mentioned earlier. We need someone that plans the investors, so if the capacity is needed, there can be competition for the sites. This is a very cheap, it's not even 500 million euros. The second aspect that I wanted to come back was, I heard from some of the speakers that coal was coming back. I don't know whether you've heard to the German Chancellor. If Merkel loses the Sunday, coal may come back, but it's unlikely. It's as unlikely as if the coal, C-O-A-L, is coming back. Even Ronnie Bellman said he doesn't expect coal to stay around. And I think this is a discussion of yesterday, which, last sentence, we never had a working electricity market in Germany. Probably, Mr. Großmann, you have not been in the business long enough to realize it. Nuclear was installed in the 70s and 80s on public money. Coal, C-O-A-L, was subsidized on public money, and we never had a competitive market taking into account short-term and longer-term investment signals. I'm not saying that this may not change, but the idea that we had a competitive market is simply untrue for Germany and probably in many other countries as well. Thanks.
Well, what you say is correct in as far as it concerns the time period before '98, but after that, you know, we are competing in a merit order with our power stations, and that part becomes smaller and smaller because of the guaranteed feed-in tariffs. And no other European nation has it quite the way that Germany has it. So this is why I'm asking for a European alignment of those rules, a common European policy also towards renewables.
And a common policy towards coal as well. Perhaps.
Towards coal as well, and I do think when you look at Europe should not close its eyes to what's happening in the world, and we were talking about over lunch, and I would bet, and I hope I'm around to cash in that bet, that in the year 2050, there is more coal mined in this world than today. And there is more oil drilled than today and more gas produced than today. Still, everybody is under the assumption that we would have less CO2. Maybe in Europe, less coal is used. But I even don't see that.
Ignacio, I know you wanted to come in. Perhaps you're going to defend capacity markets, or perhaps you have something to say about coal?
Well, first of all, for the record, I was going to make a clarification regarding the comment that was made regarding the stopping the subsidies to renewables in Spain. I mean, it is difficult to judge what the decision of a government is without being very close to the decision-making process. What is driving many of the regulatory decisions in Spain during the last few months is the tariff deficit. Something very stupid was done in 2002, which is not to pay with the tariffs the real costs of electricity, And that has been accumulated under different governments until it has reached the value of 25,000 million euros. And now the government finally had to do something about it. So they are targeting anything that moves. One of these things is renewables, but also distribution and other costs. So it is not that now they have realized that we are doing so much, too much in renewables. It is that they have to cut costs anyway. Of course, mistakes have been done and successes have been done, once in wind, another one in solar, so it is a long topic to discuss, but it is not that simple-minded statement that it was very costly. It's more things. Well, continuing with renewables, I would say that if, and the roadmap is not trying to predict what is going to happen in 2050. This is absolutely impossible. But it tries to draw some plausible trajectories and see what we could learn from them. And what we're learning from them is that renewables, in all of them that have been tested, cover at least, or should cover 55% and more, up to 75% of the primary energy consumption. And much more in electricity, of course. So that has to be supported. And that will not happen with some kind of external support. And as it was mentioned this morning, in some places in the world, now wind is being offered at $120 per megawatt hour. Wind at 75 and PV solar at 120. So, and this is because of the effort that has been made. Probably soon, wind and maybe PV will be competitive, and then of course subsidies will not, didn't have any meaning, or we could apply different methods like auctions instead of doing feed-in tariffs, so it is more market-based. But if this is the technology, the majority of the technology in the future, we'll have to do something for that to happen. Without waste and being smart. And then regarding this capacity markets, I wish the world were simple, but it is not. So different countries have been facing the problem of, well, energy-only markets, and then, well, they fear that certain investments will not take place, and the first ones were some countries in Latin America. Spain did the same thing, Ireland the same thing. Now some methods have been used in, also in capacity markets or other reliability options in the US. The UK, staunch defender of energy-only market, recently has decided to go for some kind of capacity mechanism. So the problem is that on energy-only markets, and particularly in the circumstances that we expect that will happen with lots of intermittent generation and all that, will not produce the outcome that we want. And those CCGTs will not receive the remuneration that we want, and the flexible generation will not happen, and then we need to do something. Of course, we should try to do it simple. The US has this tradition of doing things overly complex, but maybe in Europe we could try to do something smarter.
Maybe we could. We should have an energy market a bit like the US as well. Heinz, you wanted to come in there?
Yes, I would like, from what I've heard, to make 3 comments. First of all, nobody has here contested, apparently, the roadmap 2050, the scenarios there. And I think if we base ourselves on the roadmap, I think we should be honest in our discussion. None of the solutions is really cheap. So to boil it down to say renewables is costly and other solutions are cheap is simply not honest. They are all costly. So I think as politicians, the politicians should be honest to say that over the next 10 to 15 years, electricity prices in Europe will increase, irrespective of what policy we're going to pursue. Maybe there are gradual differences, but it will not be cheap. And to tell people here today, look, there is a rosy future, there is somewhere a paradise solution, is not correct. Secondly, with regard to CCS, I would like to make a comment. When I was still responsible for CCS, I always tried to take it away from the coal people and to give it to the gas people. The gas people didn't want it at the time. Now I'm very happy when I understood Simon Blakey earlier today that now Eurogas is more interested in CCS. Maybe we should take it away from the energy people altogether and give it to the industry people in general. Because how can Europe have an industrial future in 20 or 30 years' time without CCS? It's impossible. You need carbon capture storage if you want to keep your industrial base. And this has nothing to do with your electricity production mix. So I think it's self-defeating if the advocates of renewable energy very short-sightedly think that they have to be also against CCS because otherwise they could bring in coal or gas in the picture again. I think CCS is absolutely necessary for us and we should put the priorities right here. And the last comment which I have is on Mr. Großmann's remark, and I hope I misunderstood him, because he said, EU policy will help member states to reduce the influence of the market. I hope this is wrong. This is not EU policy. This is national policy. What we want to create at the EU level is a framework where the market can play. We want to get rid of those national protectionist measures, and I hope we are there on the same boat. And I agree with you completely. ETS is the instrument which should play the predominant role. Where I differ with you a little bit is that you are so negative about targets. I think in addition to ETS, targets can play a very useful role. And actually, the experience the EU has had with all sorts of targets is pretty good, because they have focused the minds and they have helped to achieve a political development. Starting from the 2014 target for achieving the internal market, for the energy efficiency priority, for the priority for renewables, whether you like it or not, but at least that is what people see on the wall there. They know what the target is, how to achieve it. Maybe there we can discuss it. But to have a target, I think, is important, and I would strongly, as I said in my presentation, encourage the Commission to make a bold, again, a proposal for targets beyond 2020. Thank you.
Great. Jürgen, you don't like targets. How do you feel about roadmaps?
Well, I have to accept targets with all business planning. On the other hand, I mean, Heinz, I would like to remind you of the Lisbon Treaty and the targets that Europe was going to be the #1 economic and industrial region of the world. It was signed in 2000 and the target was for 2010, and I think we were a bit off. And you know, you know what, well, no, targets are always good, you know, but they have to be attainable. Also, my question is, whenever, you know, Europe, and I agree, Europe's intentions are very good, but it's like when you take your medicine, you know, it says any side effects are unintended, you know, and they are there and they're dangerous. And at the moment, you know, with this belief in renewables and also belief, and look, I made my money in steel making, and if you would come to the world steel industry now and say that by 2050 all steel produced will have CCS, they will laugh at you. And they say, well, talk to aluminum first or talk to the big chemical companies. The question is whether what your expectations, the expectations that you put into the world are real. And I must tell you, even though I think I'm pretty much abreast of what's happening in the world, I see no global readiness to introduce CCS. And if Europe will introduce CCS, it will, without others coming close to it, you know, or following closely. You know, you can also lose a war when you're too far ahead. Henry Ford in 1919 had a wonderful electric car. Had he bet on the electric car instead of the gasoline engine, I would bet you Ford Motor Company wouldn't be quite as good. Now today may be the time for the electric car. So each technology has a time, and Europe is trying to push too much in too short a time at this time.
I think the time for the electric car is still 20 years hence, but What I'm going to do now is open to questions from the floor for the last 10 minutes. And let's go first down here. Your microphone doesn't seem to be...
It's not working.
You have to wait a little bit.
You have to speak.
Now?
Yes.
Maybe we've heard a lot about parties, and maybe it would be a useful way forward if this conference could propose a new concept. We have a very well-known concept in environmental law, the polluter pays principle. And maybe what we need for energy going forward is something similar, which could be the party animal pays. So the one who enjoys the party animal, should start paying for the privileges. We've heard a lot about, I think, everybody shifting the bill to somebody else through the years. Somebody else is picking up the tab, as it were. And at Christian's party, he said there were some people missing. Yeah, the consumers. They weren't at your party, but they're surely the ones who are paying. So maybe we could go forward by thinking more clearly who is paying. And what strikes me about the roadmap, but maybe I misunderstood Ignacio, but what I've seen of the criticism of the roadmap is there's no cost-benefit analysis done, no real hard cost-benefit analysis of the scenarios. So looking at targets, looking at options, it's surely necessary to start thinking very seriously where are the costs, who are paying the costs, and are the same people who are paying for things actually gaining the benefits? And
so your question is, you would like to see, say, a carbon tax, for example?
Yeah, I think that might suit, that might be indeed the party animal principle.
Anybody on the panel have any taste for a carbon tax?
Well, I would like only to say that I have here in front of me the impact assessment of the Commission accompanying the document of the Roadmap 2050 with more than 100 pages. So an impact assessment was made and the cost-benefit analysis was made.
And if I might, Christian? If I may just add, in my objective scheme, the consumer plays a very important role. And I think having these three pillars, nuclear, CCTS, please don't forget this T. It was forgotten always. And renewables, clearly the renewable schemes is the cheapest for the consumer. If I may tell an anecdote from the three pillars that I live here in Florence, in 2006 we had a party in Paris. I think Denny was there, John Parsons, Carsten, Jean-Michel, and we had this talk by a famous, we're under Chatham House rules, by this famous research engineer who told us CCTS would be available, oxy-fuel, for 20 euros per CO2. Today we can't even get the storage for 20 euros. So I think the roadmap, in all respect, I think it's utterly wrong in everything it says about CCTS, and this we need to consider it in our party. May dampen the enthusiasm, but I think we need to be realistic. We have been fooled for 15 years, and I think we should not continue to be fooled.
Since it was just said that consumers are very important and that they should know what they are paying for, I would like to say that our position is to say what we need is indeed a real cost assessment of the various options presented in the Energy 2050 roadmap, because big consumers, industrial consumers, have no other choice than actually to invest in self-generation when it is possible in order to have the long-term visibility on their costs. And renewables has never been chosen as a technology except as an opportunity to benefit from the high feed-in tariffs. But this is not the technology we need as baseload consumers. So but we don't want to enter into the choice between the options on political grounds. What we need to pay attention to is the pillar about global competitiveness. And when we talk about global competitiveness, we're not talking only about competition. We really mean about open options for consumers to get access to prices they will get access to under perfectly normal negotiation conditions in Brazil, in South Africa, in China, in the US. This is our concern, because if this is not the case, if there is a strong legal uncertainty, then investments will be done in other parts of the world, because we will have the necessary visibility. So we invite the Commission, DG Energy, to really assess. It's perfectly possible. I mean, there is nothing complicated in assessing the real cost of renewables, of nuclear, of coal, of what any technology can be perfectly well assessed. I don't say that for political reasons countries should not invest in renewables, but the member states must know in advance how much this will cost. I mean, we are in one of the biggest financial crises Europe has ever known, and it's not a worldwide crisis, it's a European crisis. If we do not make the right assessment of the cost consequences of our investments, I mean, we are going into the wall. So we are just asking, please, let's evaluate the various options from a cost perspective. We want to develop renewables for 20 years, fine. We just need to know what this represents. I mean, in Germany, a household pays 35 euro per megawatt hour, and a large industrial pays 0.5. This is the difference from 1 to 70. This is well accepted in the German political environment. This is great. If such a system will not work in Greece, it doesn't work in Poland, it doesn't work in Czech Republic, which means that actually there are really consequences of the politics decided at European level on the competitiveness of the various industries in the various European countries. So we cannot speak about a European energy market as long as we are not really talking about real numbers and figures which are really truly shared.
Another question down here.
Gunnar Lundberg again. I wonder, have we really forgotten why we liberalized the markets? I mean, to my memory, it was because we wanted to improve efficiency, and efficiency should be achieved making it more difficult to invest. It was not necessary to lower the prices, it was to making it more difficult to invest, to get rid of the huge overcapacity we had built up during the last decades of the monopoly design we had. But now, when it starts to become needed to invest again, politicians become nervous and want to introduce capacity payment and all kinds of stupid regulations instead of trusting the prices, although the industry cannot make a single investment without subsidies. European power industry is not investable anymore. Financial institutions recommend investors to invest in American and Asian power industry, but not in European, because it's not investable, because subsidies have destroyed the market prices. Can that continue? I mean, we could let the market work, that's one alternative. We could re-regulate back to monopoly, we know how that works. We would have 30–40% more employees, maybe that's good, because then we have employed more people, but it's costly and the consumers will have to pay at the end of the day. Or we could continue as we do now with all these three conflicting targets we have. And of course, that will sooner or later lead to re-regulation, because when politicians really see that we will not be able to invest, they will have to do something. And I mean, after 2020, if we continue with subsidies, we will not be able to invest, because the price will never recover, or at least in a very long time, unless, of course, if more countries get out of nuclear, so we artificially construct a need for capacity then maybe, but not otherwise. Sorry, the targets are conflicting.
So the European energy market is uninvestable. Jürgen or Jean-François, perhaps?
Well, I think I find that thought interesting and challenging, but the reality is different. Whenever you subsidize and you over-subsidize, you attract too much investment. I would argue at the moment that Germany is over-invested in renewables, because when you just add up wind, 30 gigawatts, and photovoltaic about the same, you know, is pushing base load out, and those investors, because they had guaranteed conditions, do not care what consequent costs arise in other fields, because they get their return. So I have yet to see any, you know, planned system that takes into account all these variables that the market would. And you know, whenever there is, however benevolent the planning is, and when you subsidize without a cap, all of a sudden you sit there like the apprentice magician, that Zauberlehrling, and you find out that there are some unintended consequences.
Thanks, Jürgen. Our time has sadly come to an end, so we're going to bring this panel to a halt. I'd just like to thank very much all the panelists for a very stimulating discussion.